it's such a pleasure having you on the show that is David Anderson talking market data. So I am looking forward to lots and lots of interesting conversation about market data. So thank you. Thank you for joining this. So I always do this. Just to kick off, I am going to put your LinkedIn profile and your company profile, if you will, if you can call it company, which is Occasional Digest. We're going to talk about that in a second. But could you just set the scene? Who is Kevin Gower? Where on earth did Kevin Gower come from? I mean, you're very Antipodean, I think is the right phrase, or oceanic. If we want to, my geography is
more
terrible.
A global citizen these days.
What exactly? But anyway, tell us a little bit about your background, and especially as it's pertinent to market data.
Sure. Well, the journey has been from New Zealand, and I've lost my accent from there, into Australia, Singapore, Japan, and then, of course, to here. In the last 20 years being in London, which is really where
so
all
20 years in London.
Yeah, that's how long. But technically wise, like yourself, I come from a day of punch cards to PCs to now what we all know about public cloud. That's my technical journey and all the machinations that go into making that happen.
And you were telling me earlier on, I mean, you're an ex-Reuters man as well. I mean, I was Reuters 1989 to 2001, and I worked on Triarch and then finally RMDS at the end before I left. I was before the days of TREP and now RTDS and everything. But you were ex-Reuters. When were you Reuters?
At the end of the 80s.
Right.
Out of Sydney was that day. So I certainly remember all those days. Page-based, going to record-based and feeds. Walking around the street with big boxes, circuit boards to swap out, and having a soldering iron perhaps to mend something that wasn't quite right. Having a crimp gun in those days. But now the skill set, of course, is about knowing how to configure an ENI. But that's really the engineering piece. But
we're gonna get onto that. So hold that thought. And again, it's fascinating. You come from literally the engineering side. I was this sort of flashy salesperson out there selling all this wonderful stuff way back when. So, but it's interesting how those two sides sort of came together. But so before we start, you were telling me, and I found this intriguing and interesting. What is Occasional Digest?
Well, actually, that came out of a market data need. It was really about little known facts about public holidays, particularly that problem you get on a Monday morning where it's a bit of a panic and JSE's all down, the data's stale, so everybody gets in a room and try to figure out, and actually it's a public holiday. So it started from that. I then took that idea of little known facts about public holidays, put it onto all the social media sites every day, including Discord and Blue Sky and all those ones, and grew that into stories from all around the world, from all the places I like to visit and get news articles from, put that together. And it's grown into what was last month's 6 million views.
So
from
you're a serious influencer.
Public holidays to a huge following.
Well, everybody, again, they'll be able to see the link to Occasional Digest to find out sort of what it is on the, if they're watching YouTube, Spotify, Apple, whatever it is. I'll put the link in the description. So we were chatting, I think it was only yesterday, and a point of discussion that I think is worth having. You were telling me that you are doing some advisory roles. So I got to know you. You did a big chunk of time when I knew you as the sort of head of sort of market data engineering or responsibility for market data engineering at Macquarie, that famous Australian entity. But you're now out being more independent, much like myself. You're welcome to the independent world. You were doing some advisory work on DAX on demand. And again, you were telling me how you were providing advice saying maybe think about it more as data management. What is your advice? I mean, briefly, if somebody doesn't know, tell people what DAX is, and then let's dig a bit deeper.
That's part of the issue. Yourself and I know what a DAX is, and or UVNP before that, and the community we're talking to here understand what DAX is. But as time has moved on, market data has come under procurement, and they don't understand our acronyms. Not really their sweet spot, of course. Don't understand. So I'm saying, as time has moved on, we did change the name of these things to data management, and then understand what the data is underneath the applications, the tools we're actually using, and how to manage it, which is where I see engineering people need to get to get past the like, let's talk about the OSI layers, 7 layers, get more to the top layers, 5, 6, and 7, and understand the data. But if you keep saying the word DAX or UVNP or autonomy,
and what was remind me, UVNP, was that user validation and permissioning? What was the V? Was that?
That's it. That's it.
Yeah, I remember it.
So
from
old
way
school
back.
Understand what that is, but today's community do not. So I'm saying change the wordage around to help people better understand data management. And doing that, you're looking at costs. Well, who is not using this information, which is the product.
And I mean, that there's a couple of things that are interesting in that. The whole, DAX, it predominantly people are using it as a permissioning and entitlement. So I always wonder, is there a difference? Do permissioning and entitlements mean the same thing, or are they different? I think they're the same. They're just two words for the same thing.
Two words for the same thing.
Yeah. And so it's not permissioning and entitlements, it's permissioning / entitlements is probably the way of saying it. But the other thing, the usage reporting, which I remember from my days way back, in the 90s, usage reporting was something that I think DAX provided. I think it was part of DAX. But whether it is or not, you've got two distinct operations. You've got the element that controls who can see what, and then you've got the element of who did see what historically. Those are sort of two functions, if you will. So talk us through your experiences. How to best use DAX, how to best think about it. What are the newer problems? I mean, I absolutely take your point. I think we're going to talk about data engineering. The plumbing side, I just think there's less focus on that. And as you say, it's the data. Well, I'm going to shut up. You tell us. Yeah.
So as we've move along the AI world, artificial intelligence, the DAX platform itself has an add-on in there which can determine whether you do or do not use what it is you're trying to get, the CME or the JSE, like I mentioned before. So let the machine take care of removing what you no longer wish to use or are using. Let the machine do all that work for you. You still get the reports out. You still get your DAD report out saying what was used.
Data access declaration.
That's it.
Yep.
You still get that. Look, Bloomberg have a similar mindset of this, which is their monthly sweep. So it gets rid of what's not being used. So the DAX console has this ability to actually do that. And then you start to remove those things that would happen with the particular teams to send out spreadsheets every quarter and saying, are you still using NYSE? Are you still using ASX? And then you'd get back from some people say, look, I spend more on coffee a month than what you're asking me to do, or you'll just get no response. So again, I'm saying, think of the AI mindset to let the machine take care of this grind, this daily drudgery.
Isn't there a danger there, though, that the machine, because it's noticed that Fred Blogs isn't using NYSE or something, it then automatically, from the usage reporting, it sees that. And then in the entitlements element, it decides to unentitle. Is that the right word? Unentitle, or remove the entitlement of that Fred Blogs to see NYSE. And then Fred Blogs is a really senior trader who occasionally deals with NYSE, and it's been removed the day before, the one day when he really wanted to look at NYSE, and he gets all angry and upset. I mean, isn't there I suppose this is the heart of AI. If you let AI or machines take over, isn't there a danger they do silly things?
We'll put a control in place, which is what it does, and says, you, David, are allowed to use NISE when we have the right compliance tools in place. You're allowed to use it. Now you've gone on long service leave for 6 weeks, so it's taken it off. You've come back. You want it back on. The machine just takes care of it.
And when you say the machine just takes care of it, again, it's a long time since I looked into all this. Is re-permissioning, re-entitling that person, Fred Bloggs, for NISE, just the press of a button, or does it need?
It's not but done by a team. You simply say you are entitled to this, and then it'll say you have used or you're not using at the moment. It'll turn it on and off at will. So as soon as you pull that information up again, it's available to you, so long as you're allowed to have it.
And that last bit about as long as you're allowed to have it means that your entity, your bank, for example, the procurement or the market data person has signed all the contracts necessary with NISE for what, do they sign an agreement with NISE saying explicitly that Fred Bloggs can use it, or do they say an agreement with NISE saying we've got a total of 500 people, 323 of them will have access to you, and every so often we might drop people in and out of that pool? I mean, what does NISE care about all this?
Look, taking it outside of NISE particularly, and look, your agreements are either enterprise, so anybody in the whole world can have it, which doesn't quite make sense for exchanges in that time zone, or you can say by site, or you can say a one-to-one.
Okay. So
that's just general entitlement, commercial policy.
Okay. So what other sort of advice? What's the sort of super user of DAX? I mean, again, maybe an unfair question to ask through, but you mentioned Bloomberg. You've got EMRS, which I think is, I don't know if you call it the equivalent of DAX, because Bloomberg's a very different entity and service to that which comes out of now LSEG Data and Analytics, the old Reuters part. So, yeah, super users of DAX and or EMRS. What other advice?
The advice I really give is to get on board with this and retrain the mindset to let the machine do all the hard work for you. In my experience recently, of course, with some other places, it's little known that they use it to its bare minimum to say it's on or off, which requires a lot of labor input, requires a lot of paperwork back and forth, on, off, and then they get agitation from the end user who says it takes months to get me what I need. So I'd really say to the individuals responsible in front of that particular platform to get on board with it.
And I mean, sorry, Kevin, go on.
They don't need to with the Bloomberg suite. Just simply takes care of it all by itself. So it's a very easy mechanism.
I mean, and Bloomberg, love them or hate them, they're a lot simpler. There's a lot less complexity to managing a sort of Bloomberg environment. We might come back to that in a second. But sticking with our friends, our ex-employers, the world of Reuters, Thomson Reuters, Refinitiv, now LSEG. Is what you're seeing, what you're feeling, that a lot of people are getting, you've just said it, just use it in DAX in its most basic sense. Now, them not using all the facilities, I mean, has the, again, Refinitiv now, have they been constantly expanding the set of functionality of DAX? I mean, one criticism, and I hate doing this because it is my old alma mater, is that a lot of the old, it was TRARC, it was RMDS, TREP, now RTDS, hasn't necessarily changed. I mean, DAX was around, I don't know, DAX would have probably come in something like 91 or 92, I don't know, 1990.
That's about right,
yeah, I mean, that's a long time ago. And some criticism is it hasn't changed very much, or has it?
I would say it hasn't changed that much from UVMP. There's certainly interfaces
Yeah.
looks different, the color and that, but I would say there's definitely scope here to improve it. There's a piece in that particular platform called OpenDAX,
Yeah.
which is
I've never
about
quite understood that.
which is about saying, let's say take a quantum platform. You connect a quantum platform, the end users connect to the RTDS environment, and then obtain their data from a single mount, really,
Yeah.
for that. But if you want to manage the downstream users of quantum or KDB or that, you need to put something at their server level to be able to see what those end users of quantum or KDB are using and permission it accordingly. Otherwise, you get this single notion of a single DAX account with all this permissioning, and it might include commodities and equities, all that, but you can actually narrow that down to the end user. Now, it comes across as very complicated and technically difficult to implement such an environment. And there's another platform that does something very similar to this from Markets.io, but it becomes complicated. I would say to those listening, you need to uncomplicate it by starting to say it's a data management tool.
Yeah.
And then dropping all the wording and then say you're data managing third parties, data managing other platforms, and address it that way.
And with Open DAX, does that require the third party, Quantum, KDB or whatever? Does that entity have to write some software with how they interface with the RTDS? Do they have to?
In short, yes. It's just simply a request back in HTTP request back in to say, is this person allowed to do this? That's in short all it is, but it looks complicated.
So it's a mechanism to allow different third party publishers of data who want to publish on to the RTDS to be able to leverage.
Actually, they're retrieving the data from RTDS.
Oh, so they're retrieving. Okay, so they're not publishers. They're retrieving the data and taking it out, but it's creating a more you can see individual sort of elements within those systems. Okay.
That's so be more compliant, of course. There's no need for. I thought you had 10 quantums. You've actually got 200. Remove that issue.
Yeah, because if you had the standard DAX, then it would just be a single mount, and it would see this thing called quantum or this thing called KDB as a single entity. But what you want to be able to say, if they've got downstream multiple users, and if they write their, to this open DAX format, then DAX can see a more granular usage downstream. Okay, I think
that's it.
Yeah,
that is
got it.
Yes,
got it. So that was open DAX. Then the other bit of DAX that I never really got my head around was DAX on demand. So DAX on demand, again, what was that?
Well, that is what we talked about in the first bit, which is to say, I allow you to have NYSE, allow you to have JSE, allow you to have CME. But if you stop using that, it actually turns it off, the permissioning itself, and then it turns it back on when you actually need it.
So hence, that's the on-demand bit. But again, a bit of subtlety on that. Some exchanges, some publishers of data, providers of data, acknowledge and embrace and even like that concept. I believe others don't, because some other exchanges sort of say, look, that technically means that Fred Blogs ultimately is entitled. He might be switched off, but he can be just switched on at the flick of a button. And as far as we're concerned, that means he is entitled and you should pay up.
In my experience of implementing this, and that question came up at the get-go of this, and we went out to all those exchanges to say exactly. Now, a lot of them didn't understand what it actually means, but as far as they're concerned, the reporting came out of to say David Anderson did have it in October, did not have it in November. That's how the reporting works. Now, when you come and turn it on and off, the system knows exactly the timestamp that it occurred, but the reporting they get is simply to say you do have access to these exchanges.
Got it. I didn't warn you I was going to talk about this. So if this isn't in your wheelhouse, we can steer clear of it. But when we're talking about DAX, and you mentioned data access declarations and so on and so forth, a lot of this relates to audit in the sense that at some point these big banks, these big users, and the exchanges that we're talking about will walk in and seek to audit, to check all of this. We were talking about Fred Blogs having access to XYZ exchange or whatever. So these auditors come in. Again, what's your advice or thoughts on the DAX world and auditing? Because I presume DAX is a major part of providing those auditors with information. Any thoughts, advice, etc. on that?
Absolutely critical to get the metadata behind every single user accurate and say this is an enterprise user, this is a end user, this is their location. Get it absolutely critically correct. It's in my experience, the desktop side of it works perfectly fine. Yeah. Works very fine, but it's the APIs that connect, which then the questions come up, how many downstream? And you're asked to fill in a declaration to say, actually, downstream, there are 10. And if they want to audit you further, you go, oh, actually, there's 200. That sort of creeped in. And that's an old, it's been around for a long time, that audit issue, to say how many users, if I turn this particular user off, how many people will stop working? So it's not the desktops, but it's the APIs.
And again, I'm going to slightly cross over to Bloomberg territory because again, one of the issues that people wrestle with is this concept of a server and a client, which is technical speak. So the concept is you've got an entity, could be Fred Blogs, could be David Anderson or whatever, and his PC, his computer is connecting to the RTDS as a user. And as far as DAX is concerned, they see David Anderson or Fred Blogs connecting, one user. But my PC, yes, I'm a client, but then I decide to have some clever program or something, and I've got a team of people I'm working with of 15 people, and over my local area network, they can all connect to my PC, which is now a server, and is onwardly distributing the information to those 15 people. Now, if I haven't written to Open DAX, can DAX see the 15 people who are connected to me?
True, but if we just join the Bloomberg piece there, Bloomberg connects to Bloomberg, and they're very smart and very they understand exactly how much data is being pulled down to that PC.
Well, so I think let me hit you with a thing. I don't know. Did you ever get into the DAPI versus SAPI debate? DAPI was the desktop API and SAPI was the server API that Bloomberg had different pricing mechanisms for. And in my little scenario that I just painted then, I was first of all thinking of the RTDS, the LSEG world, that Fred Blogs is a single mount, a single connection onto the RTDS. But then his PC acts as a server and is allowing all the information that he's pulling down over to his desktop, NYSE, Euronext, JSE, all the different exchange data, and he's paying all the exchange fees for him, Fred Blogs. But then he's got his 15 teammates not connecting to the RTDS, but connecting to him. And then he's redistributing internally, not externally. External is another thing, but internally, DAX wouldn't pick up those 15 people, would it?
It would not unless you had implemented the Open DAX environment. And we all know that's a no-no doing that redistribution.
Yes.
You'll get caught.
Okay. And I presume in an audit, that's where you get caught, because somebody would come in and, do auditors go down to Fred Blogs and find out that he's got his 15 teammates? Did that happen? Or were auditors that clever?
The ones I know are.
Right.
And we'll ask that question and again, look at the API side of it. Because when you look at the desktop one, you can't exactly say whether that's been daisy chained. But an API, you can ask those questions and look how many IP addresses, even though you might say you've got 10 simultaneous, that simultaneous might cascade. And the clever ones will certainly know that.
Got it. Okay, look, and any last thoughts before we move on from the DAX discussion? Anything else that you're burning to tell the world about DAX?
Look, no, I think I've gone about the two particular add-ons they have, which in my experience are just not widely adopted out there. And it is such an opportunity.
Well, I will comment, and please comment back at me on my comment, that the whole usage reporting, I do get the sense out there that more people are waking up to the fact that really, really leveraging and using detailed usage reporting, that is an important skill, an important technique, and becoming more important. Is that something you've seen?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's linked directly back to cost. Why,
Yeah.
look, the old one about why is someone in London paying for ASX? It's out of their time zone. That's the easiest one to get past there. And then there's why are they paying for level 2? They don't use it. Whereas those add-on environments can actually take care of that for you.
Let's move on, because the other sort of topic of conversation was going to be another element of sort of RTDS. And I think once we finish these two chats, you mentioned Markets.io. I want to talk beyond the world we came from, that Reuters world that came out of TRARC, RNDS, TREP, RTDS. There is more to life than just that, but we'll come on to that. ATS, the Advanced Transformation System. I think I got that right this time, ATS. Thoughts on that?
Well, it came from being DTS, didn't it? And it was rebranded to ATS. It's a tool that allows you to parse data from, let's say, pages, turn that into a RIC, and then pump that into your risk system, perhaps. It also implemented this way to take data from Morningstar, non-published data via traditional means, take that data, turn it into a RIC, and put that into your risk system. So really it acts as a middleware environment. And your choices, with something like that is to say, take the TIBCO or the Bloomberg CIS pub-sub arrangement, or take this, which is effectively really a big spreadsheet with columns and rows, and then you transform that data and push it back out again.
Because at the heart of market ecosystems is this concept of normalization and a data model. And I think south of these things like the ATS and the incoming feed handlers, everything has been normalized. You used the word RIC. I mean, I don't know. It's more than RICs. It's records that are normalized into the RTDS data model.
Yes.
RICs are already in that. RICs are by definition, from that Reuters world, Reuters instrument code, already in that format. But if I'm understanding you correctly, the advanced transformation system, the word what it's doing is transforming data that is not in that format into that format. In essence, a kind of normalization. What is it? A kind of normalization, or is it normalization? I'm getting stuck with my words.
The two pieces there. Let's say take a Tullets page where you want to just purely take that price, that broker price, put that into what now looks like a record-based RIC, and publish that. The other one is about the transformation where you take data from something that's just not published via normal means, Bloomberg, LSEG, any of those data feed providers, and take a mid-price, create a TWAP out of that, and push that back into your execution platform.
So a calculated record. So the two separate bits is one, transforming, normalizing a single bit of data that was maybe page-based or in another format, and converting it, transforming it into a record in the record format that the RTDS understands. And then the other one is a calculation engine. You're transforming 2 bits of data or 15 bits of data into a new derived new bit of data that is being calculated from more than one bit of data.
That's and that was its purpose. But in what I see now, after having left Macquarie, People just don't use it for its full capacity as a mid-tier
And
platform in the
why?
middle to do exactly that.
Why?
I think we've got the wrong people in the process who are just fine. And look, you might want to blame the market data engineers who go, I turned it on, it works, it's always worked. Don't explore any further from what's been developed over time to say, actually, we could use this to its fullest extent. That's
Well, I mean,
probably what's gone wrong. What I see.
yeah. I mean, that sparks something I picked up from another conversation I was only having yesterday. I won't say it was from, where we were talking, and this might even be a segue into our data engineering discussion, because the conversation I had with him was about data engineering and recognizing the fact that there were less people, there was less work being done on what I would call the plumbing of the market data. I mean, if I think back to my Triarch RMDS days, it was all about feed handlers, all this data coming in and then flowing over this big distribution system, pub sub, and all this sort of stuff, and multicast and point to point. And there was an enormous amount of focus on how to get this data in and how to make it flow around this maybe enormous network, enterprise of users, hundreds of different users. So they all got the data in fair and equal ways and really quickly, low latency, blah, blah, blah. Massive focus on that in the days I was working and then maybe the 20 years after. But the sense I get now is that it all sort of works. And actually, that there isn't as much work to be done in all that plumbing. But the word that somebody used was analytics. And I said, well, what do you mean by analytics? And it's this idea of, okay, we've got all the data. We can sort of reasonably take it for granted that we're going to get the data. But what are we going to do with the data once we've got it? You could just look at it. But to the ATS question and analytics, can you quants, the phrase quants creeps in here, where you can actually create models and different permutations and whatever. I mean, is sort of that the direction you're talking about? That desire to really do a lot more calculation, a lot more modeling, a lot more quantitative techniques?
Certainly, it is that I've seen that grown tremendously to taking that into a quant platform. And also the data lake side of things, which is a different topic.
What do you mean? I mean, I sort of said yes because I've heard the phrase data lakes and whatever. I mean, data lakes I always think of as more static type data than, because again, there is the classic real-time data from exchanges and whatever, this constantly updating, relatively low latency barrage of data just pumping down at you and being able to sort of look at that. A data lake always strikes me as more contemplative, and now, well, talk me through what do you understand a data lake is and why?
It's exactly what you're saying, but you get the equity team who want a lake so they can draw on the data. They want it tick by tick, but they also want to backfill it the last 10 or so years, which then you get involved with S3s, buckets, that sort of stuff, and it's there. But what I have seen in this is those lakes start to grow. I want my own lake in commodities.
Oceans they become.
Yeah, that's what I see in there. So you have to be very well. You need to somewhere further up the tree to say, look, actually, we have this data already in this particular lake, but I'm not sure how you solve that.
I mean, if we're sticking with our old alma mater, if we're sticking with the RTDS, the real-time distribution system, which is what Triarch RMDS morphed into, how does a data lake work within that context? You were talking about the ATS, the Advanced Transformation System. So how do that equities team, quant team, how do they take advantage of this? Or do they, I get a feeling they might be building their own completely different systems that just act as a consumer of data. Again, showing my age, a sink, as it would have been called, a subscribing application. or should they be taking advantage of something like ATS?
I don't see that I've not seen something like ATS pumps into a data lake. Data lake is purely about the original data rather than any derived data or contrived data. I've not seen that myself. It's certainly available, but not seen it. I've only seen it in terms of creating a mid-price, putting into another engine, or simply passing the pages, not to put into a lake and store for another day. I've not seen that.
Simpler the right word? Maybe that's a slightly negative connotation. It's not simple. So again, what's your, when you're out there advising people, what's the advice on ATS? I mean, use it more. I heard that, but expand on that a bit.
No, use it to its fullest extent. Have a deeper dive into it to get actually those things I just talked about, which are mid prices and parsing of data, or taking data that does not come naturally via means from Bloomberg or Tullets or LSEG. Take that in, because what I find is that some places they have different feeds and create code to actually parse that data, running some ASP scripts. Puts in look, one case I saw was to do Excel, putting it to Excel, then putting it back in again at a desktop level. Use again the machine to do that in the back end for you.
Because if you did it in Excel, there might be 100 people all doing a little Excel calculation. Would it make more sense to have that calculation done once at an ATS and then published as a record?
Absolutely. And the opportunity for that calculation Excel to go wrong at some point in the future is there. That's a risk.
Got it. Okay. So let's move on. And I want to sort of have a couple of things in this final bit of the conversation. Talk about market data engineering generally. Well, but let's start with something. We've talked a lot about the old Reuters world. Reuters became Thomson Reuters, became Refinitiv, became LSEG Data and Analytics. And that's where Triarch, RMDS, TREP, and now RTDS come from. And because of you and I, we were successful in propagating those systems into the vast majority of institutions, not all, but a very high proportion. It became the predominant system out there. Bloomberg, let's be honest, has come in, and frankly, in the years since I left, obviously in the years since you and I left Reuters, Bloomberg took the lead. So they should have kept us on, and then Reuters would have been okay. But Bloomberg's a very different. I know you've got BPipe and what have you, but it's not really in this classic enterprise market data system space. But there are some new. You mentioned one, Markets.io. I'm very friendly with, good old Terry Roche, Brian Stevens, Bob Bonaguru. So I know that crowd. I know the crowd from BCC Group, Bill Beards and Mauricio Gonzalez-Evans. There's Architect out there. There's a German entity, I always forget the name of that. There's a few players out there who are, I was going to say nibbling, but that's probably a bit unfair, who are challenging the status quo of the big beast that is RTDS. I mean, what have you seen? What are you hearing? What's going on in that space? Is that empire being dethroned?
Well, that's democratization is what I see, and decentralization. And the audience we've got here today knows exactly what we're talking about, those platforms from Markets.io, from Bloomberg CIS, from LSEG's
What's
RTDS.
Bloomberg CIS? What's Bloomberg CIS, isn't it?
It's a way of taking data into their system and publishing it back again.
Okay.
And of course, they've got their enterprise platform, which you can connect their terminals to, that sort of stuff. But what I'm getting involved with these days is take the thought that in the 90s, when the internet matured, we all got ourselves an equity trading account. We didn't go through a bank to do it. We all got our own equity trading account. Now with what is blockchain out there, yes, you can get yourself a margin trading account based out of the west coast of Malaysia, managed and modified by some Gen Z in Penang. That's still market data. That is still data there. And as that blockchain has matured rapidly, that becomes another engineering skill. So I see those as opportunities, not threats, to people like myself and other market data engineering people. Those opportunities are now there for them to go off in that direction rather than the banks. That's where I see the change.
But in the big institutional world, not you as I as individuals and our equity accounts or whatever, big institutions, the Goldman Sachs, the Morgan Stanley, the Citi, or even the tier 1, tier 2 banks or whatever, all taking, data feeds in and they've got them going into their RTDS, or they're just, I know some firms have gone all Bloomberg. And there are some firms who are looking at Markets.io or BCC Group or other systems. But again, I'm curious on your take. One observation I always make is that there's an enormous risk aversion. Yeah, I think there is some trepidation, if that's the right word, about having so many eggs in the LSEG data and analytics world.
True.
But it kind of works. It kind of works. I mean, I know my friends who are trying to compete with it are saying how terrible it is and how terrible they are. I don't quite see them as being terrible. I mean, I can understand the concept of somebody who's got too dominant a position. The sort of, is that a dangerous position? Is that an unfair position? I don't know. But what's changing? I mean,
some might say that the platform we certainly know about is green screen, and the other ones, New Kids on the Block, are more coloured screens. They deliver exactly the same thing. What's their unique selling point? I have my view on each of those, and
I mean, it's a space to watch, and I'm curious. I mean, I wish all of those firms the greatest of luck. I don't wish bad on my old alma mater. I'm very even. I sit here and watch it all. It'd be just interesting what the customers actually. Let's focus, because I'm looking at, we're at 42 minutes. Another conversation that you and I had, and let me set the scene. This is something I'm grappling with, because you and I, you graciously agreed to sit on a little panel on my October the 14th, 2025, because people might be watching this way after we've done this. There's an engineering stream, an FISD engineering stream event on the morning of October the 14th. If anybody watches this and still wants to come to that, get in touch with me and come and see me and Kevin, or was it Kevin and I, on October the 14th, hosted graciously by HSBC. But the topic we're going to be talking about is market data engineering. And I'm beginning to question the future of market data engineering and market data engineers. And I keep painting this picture. I saw market data engineers as these people going around with an oil can. And when the old Triumph or RDS got a bit squeaky, they'd put a bit of oil in and they'd have a spanner to tighten something up. I mean, you know what I mean? And it was all this plumbing needed to be managed and tweaked and maintained. But these days, it sort of just works. I mean, you might need somebody, or maybe there's a mechanism for distributing the oil around. I'm mixing my metaphor terribly here, but it's a lot more automated. It just works, and therefore begs the question: what is the role? I think there are less market data engineers out there. There's a lower need for market data engineers. What is the future of market data engineering? I just mentioned this analytics conversation. Are the people that build these analytics, are they market data engineers, or is it something else? Quants? What's your thoughts?
Well, I use a hand analogy on this and say to people, and a market data engineer, you sit here. Yeah, this might be your Refinitiv environment. This might be your Bloomberg, your BT Radiance. None of them have a means to talk to each other except through you.
Yeah.
That is your job. That is your skill, to know how to speak this language, that language, to resolve the issue. That does pop up, and it will always pop up. It's not about tweaking a config in a platform, a Markets.io, or a Refinitiv, or changing some config on a BT Radiance router. It's not about that. It's about communicating with all your suppliers on what they need to deliver for your customers.
and fine tuning and configuring this macro system. I mean, you've got multiple systems and they've all got to talk with each other these days. And you've got to make
Yes.
sure that sort of connectivity is optimized, whatever the right way of saying that is. Okay. But is, in your experience and what you've seen, do you think there are less market data engineers? And I'll throw in another, I'm popping into my head. There's another conversation that people have, and this pertinent to people of our age. I'm a bit older than you, but not much. That actually our generation, you mentioned going around the streets of Sydney, fixing things. I remember the sort of market data engineers in my old Reuters days and what have you. And there were a lot of people on the truck and RMDS side, engineers, but we've all got a bit old. And I've heard people say there isn't the next generation coming through who understand all those config files, all those weird and wacky things you have to do to maintain and operate an RTDS. I mean, is that a fair observation? Is there a
It's absolute
generation?
fair observation. They're not interested in at that level. They're interested in developing an app for your phone at that level. And I'm not finding people who are even interested in the data side of it, who want to know what layer 3 means, let alone a bid and ask. They're not that keen. They're more keen on picking up a phone and having someone else do it. So it goes back to essentially that supplier taking care of it. So I see that it shrinking.
I mean,
People.
Is that just a natural thing and we old fogies should just shut up and accept it and go and put our slippers on and not worry about it? Or is it worrying? Is it problematic for our industry?
Well, I thought that myself, but actually I'm very busy.
Oh, right.
I have opportunities.
But are you busy because of that?
What I'm talking about here.
Are you busy because of that problem?
Yes.
Because you're a rare commodity,
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you will put your slippers on. I don't know when you're going to put your slippers on. I'm again sorry. I'm at the venerable age of 67. I think about slippers a lot. Anyway, but I mean, so what is? I mean, what's the solution to that problem? I mean, is it educational? I mean, is it motivational? I think maybe it's motivational. We're not somehow, when I say we, the industry, that, we're not motivating this newer generation to embrace and understand some of this stuff.
It's not sexy. Green screens are not sexy to the Gen Zs. Make it a dancing center, flashing screens.
Or is it Gen X? Is it Gen X now, isn't it? I lose track of all the different gens.
Yeah, I do too. It's just not sexy for them to shell in and look at the config of an ENI, even Amazon ENI.
Is it basically not sexy? Do we have to accept that it's not sexy, or can we make it sexy? I'm mixing this metaphor terribly, but in other words, is there something we can do, we should do, not you and I literally, but we as a generation, our generation, to somehow make this more attractive to that Gen Z or Gen X or even millennials? I don't know, the younger, the newer. I don't know, how do we do that?
Yeah. Difficult one to answer. Going from a Nokia to a iPhone, I mean, the young ones will pick an iPhone any day or a rotary dial phone.
Maybe we've got to harness the generational expertise that is sitting on this call. You and I, me less so because I'm sales and marketing. You're a bit more on the engineering side, so you got your hands dirty. I'm very good at describing these things, but I couldn't actually, touch a config file if it to save my life. But there are people like your good self out there who maybe are thinking of retiring or cutting back, but maybe they're a resource that we need to nurture. So if anybody's listening in here, I mean, I don't know, it'd be interesting to get a sort of community gathering of like-minded, like-experienced people from that, the generations that worked on this. I would solicit, younger people are listening to this or management are listening to this. What What should be done? And we're not going to solve it on this call, but I think there's an interesting challenge to be
Yes.
taken up by the industry. Because otherwise you're going to get a situation in another 10 years where we really have put our slippers on, you and I, Kevin, and these systems are still out there. I mean, the observations I've had is a lot of the stuff that was around in the Triarch days is sort of still there.
Still there, yeah. Some
Chugging
still
away.
refer to IDN select feeds. I mean, take the case where you look at, say, Barclays or NatWest, the ATMs still run on COBOL. I have people who still get called in at a very great rate to resolve those kind of issues. But then you take that along, the ATMs will phase out as we move to more digital currencies. So I'm wondering, how does that work in our environment?
Yeah. I mean, is it necessary? Is the solution to just sweep away all of those old style systems? You talk about your COBOL-based, ATMs, and replace it with all new modern technology, whether it's using the blockchain. I'm a bit of a blockchain cynic, but maybe because I don't fully understand it. Is that a solution? But again, my experience, and tell me, I could write on a blank sheet of paper to some new swanky system that is far better than the existing system you've got, the legacy you've got. But I've learned over the years, removing legacy is really difficult. Its tentacles go into so many bits of the idea of saying, yeah, you've got product A, which you've had for 20 years, and here's this swanky new product C. But we all acknowledge and accept that product C is way better than product A, system A, but actually changing, upgrading, removing product A is just a nightmare. I mean, getting rid of legacy systems, what's your experience on that?
My experience is you need a compelling event. COVID, we all know what Zoom is now.
Yeah, that's a good example.
Yeah? Unless you have that compelling event, you're filling in forms, you're going down the street, having meetings, you're checking things, and except but have that COVID moment, you got Zoom. I'm not sure what a compelling moment would be here in terms of platform. Enormous legacy platform changes.
Because if it ain't broke, don't fix it is a sort of
that adage. Yeah, of course that works.
And all these new entities are coming along saying we've got something better, something shinier, something that releases you from the terrible grip of the nasty evil empire. There's some quite emotive language spoken out there, but maybe living with and I don't call them the evil empire, but living with that, it's all, it all works.
It does. And it's coped with MiFID, it's coped with DORA. It's coped from being a page-based big pipes to be record-based, sending tiny bits of data down the line. What's next, I wonder? That might change that.
And I think you might have observed this, but I've heard this from a few people. The actual business. I mean, we're market data folk. The market data procurement, the market data engineering. It's a sort of central department within a bank or something. When you actually talk to the business, I get a sense they could care less. They're really a bit uninterested in all of this conversation. This is so tedious for them, so uninteresting for them. They have got much bigger fish to fry. I mean, is that a fair observation? The actual business don't care about this stuff.
They don't care. Look, they onboarded Web 2, which is really about taking the data and adding content to it. Now we've got Web 3, which is about decentralization, but they don't care about that wording you talk about. They care about the terminal you put in front of them, which can tell them about oil tankers off the west coast of Australia. Nice graphics, again, looking sexy. It can tell them about that kind of stuff. They don't care about what's underneath it to say, how did we get it at all?
Well,
so, make it sexy.
I think I'm a good analogy for this because, I've had cars over the years I'm not one of these people who lift up the bonnet and change the spark plugs and do this or what. If it works, if anything slightly makes a funny noise, I just take it down to the garage, and I'm interested in the comfort as I sit in my car and how it drives. I don't really understand the internal combustion engine and how gears work. So maybe that's the analogy with the business
Well,
owners.
in my BYD, I would go through all the menus and see what I can get
you've got
out.
a good
Can I change the
Chinese.
color of the ceiling?
I'm thinking I have to
I
speak
would
to you
do that.
about electric cars. Look, we're at 55 minutes. I promised you. I said, Kevin, I would give you an opportunity. If there were a couple of things, market data world, the market data audience that we're talking to, we talked about a lot of things. Are there a couple of other things you didn't get a chance to mention? What a couple of other observations you would make, advice you would offer to a market data audience listening out there?
Learn the products, learn the data, move off the lower levels of the OSI, connectivity and all that. Move off that, move up to the top and learn what the data does and what you can do with it.
Which feeds into that analytics. It's actually understanding the data, not the plumbing.
That's it. And it also is very crucial for the cost. Not knowing what you're doing with the data, where it's going and how you're using it and how many costs a lot. So learn that and you've got a job for life.
Yeah. And we want people to have jobs for life to replace us as we disappear. Okay.
Yes.
And any other final thoughts, or shall we wrap this up?
Look, it's market data world is opportunity. The histrionics of us, all that time, the changes that have gone on, you keep up with it. That's all opportunity.
And I think that's the trick. I mean, crikey, I've been in this industry 41 years, I think now, and it changes. But I think you can ride with the changes. It gets harder as you've been in it longer, but no, I still love this industry. I mean, it can be a bit dry, but as this will be my 42nd episode, so there's 42 hours of conversation about market data, and hopefully there's another 42 hours still to come. So there's plenty to talk about it. Kevin, it has been an absolute pleasure. So I want to say thank you to you. And as I said to everybody, don't hang up yet. Wait until we've uploaded properly. But thank you and cheerio.
A good conversation. Thanks.
Indeed.